The Boeing 747, known as the Queen of the Skies, has ruled the heavens for decades. A symbol of aviation excellence, power, and reliability. But even the most advanced aircraft can be vulnerable to disaster. And on this fateful flight, a routine takeoff from Los Angeles International Airport would turn into a desperate struggle for survival over the vast Atlantic Ocean. The flight had begun like any other. The massive jet, carrying hundreds of passengers and crew, stood proudly on the runway, its four powerful engines ready to propel it into the sky. The pilots completed their final checks, the passengers settled into their seats, and the aircraft began its thunderous charge down the tarmac. Within moments, the nose lifted, and the Boeing 747 soared into the sky, climbing steadily into the darkness above Los Angeles. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. The passengers relaxed, some gazing out at the twinkling city lights below. The cabin crew moved through the aisles, preparing for the long journey ahead. But then, disaster struck. A sudden jolt, a deafening explosion, a blinding flash from the right wing. The aircraft shuddered violently as one of its massive engines erupted in flames. Smoke trailed behind the jet, stretching like a black scar across the night sky. Inside the cockpit, alarms screamed for attention. The pilots, seasoned professionals, were suddenly faced with their worst nightmare, an in-flight fire. The Boeing 747 was a masterpiece of engineering, but fire in the air is an unforgiving enemy. The crew sprang into action, assessing the damage, scanning the instruments, and working together to contain the crisis. The fire warning light glowed an ominous red. One of the engines had suffered a catastrophic failure. The pilots knew that they needed to act fast. Could they extinguish the flames? Was the fire spreading? Would the heat compromise the wing structure? Every second mattered. As the aircraft continued its ascent, passengers near the windows could see the terrifying sight: bright orange flames licking at the engine, casting an eerie glow against the fuselage. The fear inside the cabin was palpable. Some whispered prayers, others gripped their armrests, their knuckles white. Flight attendants rushed to reassure passengers, their faces betraying the urgency of the moment. Then came the decision: turn back to Los Angeles or continue the flight. The aircraft was heavy with fuel, bound for an international destination. Dumping fuel would take time. But flying with an engine fire over the vast Atlantic Ocean was a risk no one wanted to take. The pilots initiated emergency procedures. The affected engine was shut down, fuel was cut off, and fire suppression systems were engaged. But the fire continued to burn. Flames flickered dangerously close to the wing, threatening the integrity of the aircraft. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. The chilling words echoed over the radio as the flight crew contacted air traffic control. The controllers on the ground listened with intense focus, immediately clearing airspace for an emergency return. Fire crews in Los Angeles prepared for the worst. The pilots banked the aircraft carefully, turning back toward the airport. The weight of the fully loaded jet made the maneuver even more difficult. The passengers, many of them unaware of the full extent of the danger, could feel the aircraft's shift in direction. The tension was unbearable. The flames continued to rage. If they reached the fuel tanks, it would be over in seconds. The pilots descended as quickly as they could while maintaining control, their minds racing through every possible scenario. Would the landing gear deploy? Would the aircraft hold together? The city lights of Los Angeles reappeared in the distance, growing closer with every passing second. Fire trucks and emergency vehicles lined the runway, ready to respond in an instant. The aircraft was now on final approach, the pilots performing the most critical landing of their careers. The wheels touched down. The tires screeched against the asphalt, smoke billowing as the pilots engaged the brakes. Fire crews raced alongside the jet, their hoses already spraying foam before the aircraft had even come to a complete stop. The plane shuddered but remained intact. And then, silence. The cabin erupted in a mix of cheers and tears. Against all odds, they had survived. The passengers, shaken but safe, began to process the reality of what had just happened. The fire crews worked quickly, smothering the last remnants of the flames. The Boeing 747, though wounded, had made it back to the ground. But the questions remained. What had caused the fire? Was it a mechanical failure? A bird strike? A flaw in the engine design? The investigation would take months, with engineers, analysts, and aviation experts piecing together the puzzle. The aviation world took notice. Airlines conducted urgent inspections, manufacturers reviewed safety protocols, and pilots underwent new training for similar emergencies. The Boeing 747 had survived this battle, but the incident served as a chilling reminder. No aircraft, no matter how mighty, is invincible. In the vast and unforgiving sky, even the most experienced pilots and the most advanced technology are at the mercy of the unknown. For those on board, it was a flight they would never forget. A close encounter with disaster. A reminder of the fine line between life and tragedy in the world of aviation. And as the wreckage was examined, as reports were written, and as investigators searched for answers, one thing remained clear. On that night, high above the Atlantic, they had been alone in the inferno.